Deputy Shahnos.
Thank you,
You
Ms.
have
Kinkula.
6 minutes.
I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak to this bill, which I find a deeply depressing reflection of thinking, not so much of the government, but I think of the Department of Finance and the people who dictate their thought to them from elsewhere. You know, it's a kind of a monument to financial orthodoxy, and I suspect it's possibly the most conservative finance bill in the last 30 or 40 years. It's totally lacking in any imagination. It's totally lacking in any vision. It is certainly reflecting a conservative way of thinking, which does not reflect the sense of urgency and the vision which might be included in a measure of this sort. The problem I have with it, I suppose, is that it just comes back to all the same sources for income and for revenue, and looks very little further than that. You know, there was an opportunity in this budget and in this finance bill to embark upon a new model, to say to the Troika, all right, we acknowledge that we have to produce a certain amount of revenue to bridge the budget deficit. We acknowledge that there's a problem there, but allow us to do what we like within those parameters and within the projections we have. And indeed, anybody who's been to see the Troika, as virtually everybody in this House seems to have done now, seems to get a different interpretation from what they say and from what the government says. The government, when it's politically convenient, blames the Troika for the thinking behind the budget and the measures behind the budget. The Troika say, well, they can actually do what they like as long as the figures at the end, pretty roughly, measure up. Now, they do pretty roughly measure up. I don't dispute that. But the measures are the measures of financial orthodoxy. You know, I've been listening for a long time to my colleagues on this side of the House from the left. And I don't agree with very much of what they say. But I do find it far more challenging, and in some cases more convincing, to listen to Joe Higgins and Richard Boyd Barrett than I do to listen to John Moran and the Department of Finance. Because at least they are trying to portray a new model. I think they're wrong about their sums, but at least they are trying to portray a new model and a new way of doing things, not within those same parameters. And I listen to Deputy Boyd Barrett from time to time, talking what I don't believe makes financial sense in the long run, when he talks about the multinationals. When he says there is a great pot of gold out there in the multinationals, if you go out there and tax them a lot more because they're not paying the right rates, if you tax them that much more, you get billions more for the exchequer, and you'll gradually bridge that gap. I don't agree with him, but I think he's put his finger on something quite interesting, which is that there is great potential in those multinationals, which are, after all, a kind of political grey area here, because people are treat them rather tenderly, encourage them in some ways, and then go and batter them on the head in others. My contention is this: they should be nurtured. They should be encouraged. And I don't know if anybody in the House remembers the budget of, I can't remember the date now.
Deputy, you have 2 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, it was a fit of full budget at some stage, where they actually reduced capital gains tax. And we know what happened when they reduced capital gains tax. Revenue rocketed. And I would suggest to the government that they would be thinking a little bit outside the box and looking at corporation tax, and I've said this before, and I say it again, and saying, okay, why don't we reduce that a bit? Because personally, I think it would bring in more of the big ticket items that we so badly need. Whatever people feel ideologically about multinationals, they do certain things here. They brought in the Americans on their own, over 100,000 jobs, and on top of that, they bring in enormous spin-off activity in the economy. And I don't care as much as others obviously do, whether they're paying 0% or 12.5% or 33%. I just say the more of them, the better at the moment, because they'll produce more jobs and they'll produce activity in the community, which is so important and which is what they need. And the government appears to have absolutely no jobs policy whatsoever. You can't really have a jobs policy if you're doing what the Mandarins tell you and what the Troika tell you. The only jobs policy I've seen from them is crucify the pensioners, put 0.6% levy on them and put it into some sort of mythical bucket elsewhere, which is going to produce jobs. That's part of their jobs policy. Their second jobs policy is emigration. And that's the kind of unsung government hero.
Thank you.
Because emigration sorts out unemployment in a very, very negative and very miserable way.
Thank you, Deputy.
It is not acceptable. It is not acceptable that should be the safety valve for the government when they're preaching jobs and unemployment as one of the great problems of the economy.
Thank you, Deputy. Thank you.